Welcome to Stories of Our Watersheds, River Restoration Northwest's annual film event. I'm Tad Schwager. Each year we round up new short films that celebrate our watersheds and showcase the work being done to protect and restore our rivers and floodplains. This year we have a collection of films from Colorado to Canada that emphasize the human connection to our beloved rivers. We get a glimpse of different cultures and perspectives that encourage us to ask ourselves, what does a river mean to me? River Restoration Northwest is a nonprofit organization committed to advancing the science of restoration through education and an interdisciplinary approach. We host classes, field trips, and speaking events throughout the year and are eagerly anticipating the return of our annual symposium in February. Check out the website for more details on safety precautions and registration. Before we begin, I want to thank our many sponsors for their unwavering support over this challenging year. This YouTube link will be live until Sunday, October 17th, when we hope you will join us for a live Zoom event where you can meet many of the filmmakers and learn more about their work. To prepare for this event, submit your questions in the YouTube comment space for each film and use the like button to vote for your favorites. Now, grab some popcorn and enjoy the show.
Buenos días, muchachos. Yo tenía una adicción, era adicto, era alcohólico y usaba droga. Un día en mi borrachera le dije a Dios, oye, Señor, le digo, si en realidad, como dice la gente, que tú quitas todas estas adicciones, digo, pues si en realidad tú eres así, quítame esta adicción del alcohol y la droga, le digo. ¿Sabes qué? Yo amo a mi familia, le digo. Yo quiero a mi familia, yo no quiero perder a mi esposa. Yo no quiero que mis hijos el día de mañana sean así. Digo, ayúdame. Y fue cuando Dios cambió mi vida. En una parte de la Biblia dice que Él mandó a Moisés a sacarnos de la tierra de Egipto para llevarnos a la tierra prometida, a la tierra donde fluye leche y miel. Entonces, en estos momentos estamos en esa tierra, porque esta tierra fluye todo eso. Todo se siembra aquí, gracias al río Colorado.
The Colorado River is the life of Yuma. We live and we have jobs because of the Colorado River. When we receive information that the Colorado River every year has less and less and less water, we as Christians, we got together to be more active. We have a commandment in the book of Genesis to be good managers, good stewards of the resources that He gave us.
Diga conmigo en esta mañana, voy a comenzar a ser un buen administrador. Diga conmigo, seré un buen administrador de las bendiciones que Dios me ha dado.
Many of the members of our church here in Yuma, they work in the agriculture. From the month of October to the month of May, that's what brings bread to their tables. This is who we are. This is very hardworking people. Most of the population in Yuma, they are immigrants.
Vivimos en San Luis Río Colorado, Sonora. En el 90 nos venimos para acá, para Arizona. Ahora manejo un tractor. Yo hago los bordos, los diches, los canales, para que echen agua para regarse la verdura. Y la gente es muy noble, la gente es muy buena. No es gente malosa. En este pueblo estamos bien tranquilos, vivimos bien a gusto. Hasta ahorita estamos viviendo una vida bien. Pues esperemos en Dios que todo siga igual.
My name is Luis Diaz. I am a longtime resident of Gadsden, long time, almost 75 years. I was born out here under a mesquite tree in a little village called the Mexican Barrio. So I was a real cheap baby, I guess, maybe like $2.85, I don't know. But, and I've been here all my life. Well, these papers are Gadsden newspapers. This is the bedroom, there's not much in there. I remember very well when I was in the 5th grade, I sat by this window. This is my son's first pair of boots. He's already 52. But you know what? One of the things I think a lot of people forget is they forget the history of America. They forget the history of their local surroundings. And so this is something that I've tried to preserve. You guys ready to go outside? Those mailboxes are Gadsden's first mailboxes. Over here we have the rest of the town. And I developed all of this just to resemble the Southwest. You can see my lady of the night trying to escape up there. But you gotta remember something. I built everything here, but it's a lot of fun. We were raised in this adobe house when we were kids. That's my dad built that just out of the war in 1945. Yep. All right, that's her parrot. Them thing attacked me the other day. See, watch him. So they're bouncing around and all quit. They gave it to her. She says, they'll talk. That damn bird's never gonna talk. I hope it's not caught in us. Are you all right? Yeah. Damn bird. People overlook the fact of water. We take it for granted. So when you go down there, it's, oh yeah, there's a river. Well, to me, there's a creek. It's not a river anymore. My grandmother, back in the early 1900s, she used to go up and down the river on the paddle boats. Now there's no need for a paddle boat. You just need high boots and you walk across. I remember the river running like an ocean. And you go over there right now and it's just a trickle. I don't know what's in the future, but it doesn't look good as far as the water availability is concerned.
Porque es un trabajo bien pesado, pero bien hermoso. Porque nos llena de satisfacción a nosotros que nosotros podamos trabajar para poder mandarles a otras partes del mundo esta comida. Padre, en esta hora, Señor, te damos gracias, Señor, porque tú has permitido llegar hasta estos momentos, Señor, tus sagrados alimentos, Señor, en el nombre de Jesús. Amén, y vamos a darle. Tengo 5 hijos, 4 hombres y una muchacha, y todos están estudiando.
Fuimos trabajadores del campo muchos años y de ahí nuestros hijos se enseñaron a trabajar la tierra. Se iban a trabajar con nosotros y ellos sabían que el esfuerzo que hacían sus papás era para sacarlos adelante. El trabajo del campo es hermoso, es digno, pero nosotros siempre les dijimos, ustedes van más para adelante.
Entonces, ¿qué más le puede pedir a la vida y a Dios? Tenemos todo.
For us Christians, the baptism represents a new life, a new beginning. Baptizing at the Colorado River for our church represents that we are not disconnected from what God gave us.
Esta mañana quiero decirles que tengamos cuidado y cuidemos lo que Dios nos ha dado. Vivimos en una ciudad bendecida por Dios. Si nosotros no cuidamos de nuestra agua, si no cuidamos de nuestros ríos, ¿qué herencia le estamos dejando a nuestros nietos?
Es muy beneficioso. Dice que no es muy grande, pero es bien trabajador. Y sostiene a muchas familias. A muchas familias sostiene el río Colorado. Porque da la vida. El agua es vida.
Jesús entró a las aguas y santificó las aguas. Jesús entra a nuestro corazón y santifica nuestro corazón. Y del Espíritu Santo.
July 15th, 2020 is our first day of in-water work. It's the first day that the permits allow us to go in the water. So of course I'm getting pretty excited because I've been waiting for this for a long time. and the machines start coming and having to cross the river and start digging out material so that we can divert the whole river, and they get closer and closer to the dam. Finally, we're able to divert the whole river through the fish ladder, get the water out of the way, and then I see Mike with his excavator sitting there about ready to start hammering the dam, and when you see that first little bit of concrete go flying, I mean, it's a celebratory moment. The Pilchuck River Diversion Dam was initially installed in 1912. There was actually two dams that were formerly at the site. One was just upstream of the bigger dam that was installed in 1932. And they both were installed to supply drinking water to the city of Snohomish. Things get old, transmission mains start failing, it starts costing a lot of money, and so at this point there's no purpose for it anymore because the city purchased water from a different source for much less money, and so it allowed us to remove this dam.
Certainly when the dam was built, it was a much different time. Did not do a good job of thinking about what kind of damage that would do to resources or to people and their culture and their lifeways. I think it's incredibly frustrating, and I think it's something that's happened not just here, but all over the Northwest, all over the country for the last 250, 300 years. Tribal people have been, ignored and haven't had their values represented. That's how we got in this situation that we're in with this dam, and why it was so important to help get this dam removed. It's important for the fish, and it's important for the culture, important for the people, but it's also important for righting that historical wrong.
It's really exciting for Tulalip to be a part of this because this took out a dam that was destroying the spawning beds for fish for many generations. So this is really exciting for Tulalip to be one of the leads in making this project a reality. Our ancestors are very thankful. I could feel my dad too. He's very proud of this moment to see this open up. We are the salmon people. As co-managers of this resource, the salmon, we know what needs to be done to help them survive.
So when we first removed that little bucket of material and let the river reoccupy where it hadn't been for over 100 years, we started seeing sediment sorting downriver. You could stand in the channel and feel your foot kind of sinking as all the sediment started going downstream. And it was really cool to see that river, that dynamic river process kind of come back to life. It's like the river just all of a sudden kind of got its old life back, and you could see it moving, you could see it changing. And I'm really excited to see what happens when we get some bigger flows. Right now, the river is at its summer low flow, but in a month or two, it's gonna start raging out here, and that's when we're gonna see really big changes in the site, specifically where the dam used to be and just slightly upstream. We really know that there's not gonna be many changes downstream, but it's gonna be so exciting to see what happens here on site and how the river reoccupies its historic location.
This river has finally got to flow the way it wanted to, back to its natural state. So we're really excited to see what will come in the future of this project. This means a lot, not only to our people, but to future generations, to make sure that they will have salmon for their children and their grandchildren. So we will also help with the efforts to save the Kolko Lahech, see how much more fish we can provide to save our natural resources.
We have got to get projects like this done, period. I mean, we absolutely just have to. There isn't enough quality spawning and rearing habitat, and those are the things sort of that we can control. The fish are adept at navigating their way through the river the way it naturally flows. And so now that we've gotten rid of this dam and taken it out, the river is going to take back over, and it's going to do, what it's supposed to do, which is it's going to flash up in the winter, and it's going to push things down, and it's going to pull trees into the river. And the fish, they're perfectly adapted to that, both the juveniles and the adults.
This dam was located right at the edge between the best habitat in the whole river basin and the impacted downstream habitat that people have been modifying for a really long time. So that edge that was defined by a dam, by an obstruction, instead be opened up to where that connection between really great habitat and areas that we're trying to help facilitate get better, that little connection, that little restoring the river connectivity is really cool. And I expect that to continue over time. You know, I think we're learning from our mistakes, and I think that we're not going to be putting these damaging dams in these rivers in this place anymore, because I think we know that that impacts us, that impacts people, that impacts fish, that degrades our experience. And so I'm really, really hopeful that we'll just continue to increase downstream habitat and increase connectivity so that we really see gains over time in these places. I don't know, I don't see anything back there. I don't know what happened, but it's gone.
After a somewhat miraculous journey of over 300 miles from the Pacific Ocean, these adult returning salmon and steelhead have one of three choices to make once they're in Lake Billy Chinook. They can either go up the Crooked River, the Metolius River, or the Deschutes River.
The fish chose the Crooked River.
Most of the biologists are kind of puzzled why. My theory is because of all the springs and, of course, the best tasting water in Oregon.
We believe the Crooked River's habitat is producing higher numbers of healthier juvenile fish, which in return leads to more adults returning to the Crooked River. The two key species for our Crooked River would be the Chinook salmon and the Mid-Columbia steelhead. So we know that if we can get these two fish reestablished in sustainable runs year after year, that the rest of the system will be healthy as well. That'll be an indicator of system health.
I don't think there has been any other species that is as central to the Northwest human experience as salmon. They are a critical food source for humans and animals alike. They support a thriving commercial and recreational fishing industry. Fish chose the Crooked River. They chose to come here in their search for suitable habitat. They are here, and we need to help them access it as best we can.
Lake Billy Chinook, which is the most popular reservoir in the county, had salmon and steelhead reintroduced into it when their dam had to be relicensed. So that put more recent impetus on us to try to figure out how to accommodate salmon and steelhead that were starting to go up the Crooked River.
The Opal Springs Fish Passage Project is a win-win because it eliminates a barrier to fish migration moving up the Crooked River, and it also maintains a renewable hydropower source for the community.
It is the #2 priority fish passage project in the whole state, according to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Today, they're trapping and hauling adult fish around that project. It's not volitional passage right now, which would of course mean the fish are moving on their own. Before we could get started, we were faced with two main challenges. The first really was the engineering designs that would fit both the canyon and meet all the project objectives. The second one was securing the funding. The early 2000s is when the Pelton Round Butte project was relicensed. That triggered a series of events, and of course one of the big actions we need to take is to get passage past the Opal diversion site on the Crooked River.
What Deschutes Valley Water District could have done is waited until their current license term expired in 2032, but they decided instead to proactively engage with us, and I think we all ended up the better for it.
There's two reasons for doing this fish passage. One is the right thing to do, and two, you can actually get better hydro revenue if you have fish-friendly hydroelectric power. We can get classified as renewable and make more hydroelectric dollars in our future.
We hope that this project contributes to achieving healthy, sustainable, and harvestable populations of fish throughout the Crooked River and the Deschutes watershed.
When I think about Opal Springs, this amazing visual of stark canyon walls and beautiful water and a spring coming right out of the side of this canyon, in and of itself is just a unique place in the state. But it's also really unique because it is a working system. The Crooked River is home to agriculture, it is home to timber in the upper reaches. The water district is providing a vital function for the local economy.
With passage at Opal Springs, that will be taking care of the #1 priority in terms of fish restoration in the Crooked.
The biggest obstacle to this whole process was getting all of the fish agencies and us on the same page as far as what kind of project, how much do you raise the dam level, which type of fish passage. We're actually raising the elevation of the dam so that we have a little more hydroelectric power, but also part of that is used for a water bank so that when the biologists call us, we can pass water over the part of the dam for attractant water.
Fish tend to follow the water, so we did not want them going towards the turbine tail race. We wanted them to go towards the fish ladder, so we needed more attraction water. We will be able to notify the Sheets Valley Water District, tell them, hey, we have fish in the area. We want to use some of the water from our fish account and increase flows in that bypass reach.
As you can see, we've started into the mass excavation along that rock face. You can see that we've built a ramp up the side of the hill. Eventually that entire dirt ramp, including those 3 large boulders, are all going to go away. And once we get to that point, we'll to build the fish ladder all the way out to the switchback.
We were forming the walls for the spillway chute. There will be a gate between those 2 walls, which is a safety mechanism for the dam so that if they have some flooding, that gate can be opened and allow excess water past the dam.
There will be 42 separate little pools within that ladder that will bring fish up that elevation of about 30 feet in height, roughly. So that's a pretty tall lift. The ladder here will open up 125 miles of habitat.
We are physically breaking down a barrier. We are going to have fish entering into a system in a very different way than before. But the project itself is really breaking down barriers. That ability to partner between a watershed council and a water district and regulatory agencies and funders. When we do that well here, we break down barriers in other parts of the state to do projects equally as large in other systems.
The Watershed Council has done a great job of working with private landowners to implement these projects, but there's a lot more work to be done.
The tribe's general priorities in the Crooked River Basin, and for that matter the Deschutes Basin, are putting the plans into place that will ensure that 7 generations from today we will have a healthy basin to help sustain our people. We hope to achieve a reintroduction program above the Pelton Round Butte project, and the Opal Springs Fish Ladder project was really the last barrier for that particular arm of the basin, the Crooked River Basin. And bringing this ladder to completion will be the last hurdle that the fish were at during their migration route.
The success and effectiveness of this project really has 2 facets to it. The completion of phase 1, and that is construction of the fish ladder. Phase 2 is going to be operation and monitoring.
In the short term, of course, we hope to see operation of the fish ladder such that it provides safe, effective, timely passage of migrating fish. In the long term, though, we hope that this project contributes to achieving healthy, sustainable, and harvestable populations of fish throughout the Crooked River. And ultimately, hopefully, that means that we might see a year-round fishery in the Crooked River someday for some of these species.
So it's been at least 50 years since salmon and steelhead have moved through the Opal Springs site under their own volition. Here we are now, November 2019. We have a completed ladder. In fact, we've witnessed the first documented steelhead swimming through the ladder on its way into the Crooked River to find spawning areas.
Into the future, the Watershed Council would like to see a continuation of the restoration work that addresses limiting factors to fish production. Ultimately, the objective in a working lands watershed like the Crooked is to get it to all work together. The council actually believes it can be done, and we're committed fully to the mission.
Operations Cell Structure Protection Group on command. 7, go ahead, Rob. Got about 3 engine companies here. We're trying to knock down embers in the backyard, so we could use a little help here.
Sizzling temperatures and dry conditions have fueled the 416 fire.
County manager has declared a state of local disaster.
More than 2,100 homes are evacuated and more than 20,000 acres have burned just north of Durango.
I copy that traffic. We're moving on. You have all that will be impacted in less than 5.
It's usually not the immediate fire that affects the fish population. It's the monsoonal rainstorm that happens afterwards. That rainstorm just sends tons of mud and ash and lots of nasty chemicals that come out of the soils and trees, and it's toxic to fish. So we knew it was going to be a devastating event.
How did you explain to your wife that you were driving into a wildfire to rescue a fish?
She's used to it. I do have one fish joke. What did the smallmouth bass say to the largemouth bass when he ran into the dam? Hey, you dumb bass.
Oh boy.
My name is Jim White. I'm an aquatic biologist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. A lot of people have no idea, but it's an awesome job. I think the cool thing about fish is most people don't really get to know them. Fish do have personalities. They very much have a hen pecking order, particularly trout. A friend of mine one time said you couldn't help but be anything but a fish biologist, and he was correct when he said that. Cutthroat trout are absolute jewel of a trout. Anybody that's ever seen one, they're fantastic, but they're fairly delicate. They typically occupy sort of these more open reaches. That's probably why their coloration is the way it is. It's kind of that goldeny, bronzy color that matches really well if you're in a sunlit stream. Cutthroat trout were widespread before Western settlement. During that time, there was a destruction of not only the natural environment, but also the introduction of non-native trout. Because cutthroat trout did not evolve with any other species of trout in the systems, they didn't evolve sort of defense mechanisms against increased competition and predation by these other trout species, and so they quickly started to disappear. Just in the state of Colorado, we've learned a lot. And the last 12 years have been very informative about the distribution of cutthroat trout. Way down in the southwest part of Colorado where we are now, there's a variation that we were calling the San Juan cutthroat trout that's unique genetically. And that San Juan cutthroat trout was, as recently as just a few years ago, thought to be extinct. But in 2018, using genetics from cutthroat trout in the area, we were able to trace back populations that we knew about and confirm that San Juan cutthroat trout were indeed still around. It was awesome to realize that those native fish were still present, but it was also somewhat terrifying recognizing that most of these populations that I was aware of were extremely small and vulnerable to things like wildfire.
Why is it necessary to conserve species? That's a great question. People might argue that, well, it's hair splitting. You know, we already had the Colorado cutthroat trout, and then we did genetic testing and we realized that, wow, there's actually some subspecies of this, some different strains. And the question becomes, is it important to preserve that? It's a never-ending chore to try and figure out how to manage land. Every piece of property you manage is unique. Banded Peak Ranch sits in the Navajo Basin, the upper Navajo Basin, and is essentially an entire watershed. It's 52,000 acres, and when you look at those 52,000 acres in a topography like this, I mean, that's a lot of land. It takes you a couple hours to drive around from one end to the other for sure. We typically get about 250 inches of snow a year. It gives us a pretty short window of time that we can do work. Hauling livestock, hauling equipment, hauling logs around, that sort of thing. So we got to run diesels just because I got the power to do it.
Do you kind of develop like an emotional connection to your truck?
I don't, absolutely not, no. I barely have an emotional connection to my family. My name is Tim Harmon. I'm the ranch manager at the Banded Peak Ranch. There's a lot of water that comes off of this particular ranch, which is a drinking water source for cities like Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Unfortunately, if we were to get a catastrophic wildfire in here, it does a lot of damage to the soil, causes a lot of post-fire erosion. The primary reason we're working in the forest is to thin those forests so that when a wildfire does come through, it doesn't burn so hot. You end up with these big, what we call slash piles. One of the best ways to get rid of those and put those nutrients back in the soil is actually to light them on fire. I think it's absolutely important to invest in cutthroat. Anytime you have an opportunity to take a unique organism and preserve it and protect it, it's worth doing, worth the resources. If you're able to do that on an entire watershed, then you start to have a real impact. Population growth is a really major factor on wildlife throughout the Rocky Mountains. What you're starting to see is just loss of viable habitat, and obviously kind of a warming trend is really showing a heavy impact, I think, in this region. When you start talking forest management or river restoration, those are very expensive endeavors. It's typically at a pretty steep cost to ownership to manage their property.
So this is where the 416 fire happened. We're at the southern end of the fire, not far from where it started. And this was 2 years ago that it burned, but you can still see the large standing dead timber from the severity of the burn. As the fire started really gaining momentum, we realized that 2 of our populations of San Juan cutthroat trout were in this drainage. We had worked out a deal with the Forest Service to mount this rescue. We had just a few hours to remove the fish from the stream. We had, I think, 6 miles of four-wheeler access, 2.5 miles of hike. And we could see the fire growing in the sort of distance, and had to drive through the fire zone to get out of there. Once we got the fish back to the trailhead, we realized that we had a truck full of San Juan cutthroat trout, but that was just the start of a new journey. Tim.
Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, welcome back.
Good to see you.
On this ranch, we happen to have 2 of the 6 existing streams that have that San Juan strain of the Colorado Cut. Today, we took some fish that they raised in the hatchery and reintroduced them into a new stream.
We needed partners with other streams that had San Juan cutthroat trout in them to step up and help us create more genetically diverse populations. Banded Peak Ranch was ideal for setting up a pond that could strengthen the San Juan cutthroat trout populations. It's important to locate habitats that don't have non-native fish in them. They're pretty harmful to Colorado River cutthroat trout because they outcompete them, they prey on them, and they also hybridize. On public land, it's relatively rare to find a piece of water that hasn't already had non-native fish widely distributed in the watershed above that lake. Having a really good working relationship with private landowners is critical. Banded Peak Ranch has some of the most remote headwater streams in the state of Colorado. The ranch has been incredibly conservation-minded and on board with everything we've ever proposed, so it's been a wonderful partnership. Aldo Leopold said, preserve every cog in the wheel because you may not understand how important that one cog is. That philosophy guides our management for cutthroat trout.
Personally, I think that there's value in all of these species that we have, and I think there's probably a lot going on within ecosystems that we don't understand. As we lose that diversity, there's going to be impacts to those ecosystems.
Private land holdings are critical for conservation of not just fish, but wildlife as well. They're undisturbed by the general public. They provide this sort of refuge from anglers.
One of the beauties of private land is that you have an opportunity to experiment a little bit. As long as you're partnering with the right authorities, then you can have some real action-oriented projects and hopefully get results quickly. In this particular area, there's a really amazing effort at collaborative land management between the states, between the Forest Service, private landowners. There's a place at the table for everyone. I think there's real power in that.
Releasing these fish into the wild is really an awesome feeling. They've had a lot thrown at them, but they're persisting. There are a lot of folks out there who really want to see native species flourish. That gives me hope about the future of cutthroat trout.
Yeah, my hope is that the work that we do here helps contribute to the recovery of fish populations in the area. And if we can make this small system more productive, more healthy for the fish and the wildlife that live here, I think that's a victory and something we sort of owe these places where we live.
Hydra Hill is a typical West Coast watershed that was logged pre-regulations. So this valley especially is extremely steep, and so when it was logged, we wound up with a lot of erosion and sediment entering the watershed. But at the same time, we've also decided to put a highway right next to the river, which has basically bisected the floodplain. And when it's really raining out here, the water overwhelms the creeks and accelerates erosion and degrades habitat. But in the summer, when it's low flow, there's no water at all.
So essentially this river has been buried in gravel, and much of the spawning and rearing habitat has been lost. And this stream is one of thousands here along the west coast that have seen these similar impacts, and as a result, habitat loss and many other factors, salmon are really struggling out here.
You know, the salmon coming upstream, you know, the bears get to eat, the ravens get to eat, eagles get to eat, you know, and it's just one big life cycle. You know, all the stream restoration, riparian work, it's for the love of salmon, really.
People ask a lot of the time if restoration is effective or if restoration does anything, and in this case, we've seen some pretty remarkable results. We have year-round surface water, we've created pool habitat, we've put in some wood for fish to hide in, and fish are so resilient, we've built this new habitat and they're already there.
While there's still lots of work to be done, the results of this project and others have shown us that we can have a positive impact on these watersheds and undo some of that damage and foster recovery to a healthy ecosystem that supports thriving fish and wildlife populations that are so important to life on the coast here.
This is Rainbow Bend. It's part of the Larry Phillips Natural Area on the Cedar River in King County, and one of our most successful combined flood safety and habitat restoration projects to date.
I think one thing that I like to emphasize is that all we did was take out a hard barrier to channel migration, and we put in a little pilot channel and we planted a bunch of plants. What's played out since 2013, that construction effort, has all been the river doing that work. All these natural processes of channel migration, side channel formation, wood accumulation, it's all that change and allowing that river to kind of move back and forth and change every year. That's what I love about this site. Every time you come out here, it changes a little bit. That's what creates good salmon habitat.
We are so fortunate here in King County to have such high-level teams of engineers and scientists and experts to help us put together multifaceted, complex projects like this one. And I'm really grateful. I want to be here today to thank all of those, as well as people in the community who've helped make the Rainbow Bend and all of our projects up and down the Cedar possible.
I think the starting place is this area of the river has been identified as one of the worst flood problems in all of King County for years and years and years. A levee that was built at the upstream end of an isolated neighborhood overtopped regularly. It wasn't designed for containment. When it overtopped, the neighborhood would experience fast, deep flows. It would flood homes, it would cut off access in and out. It would flood septic systems and drinking water supplies. It was really damaging. The levee not only allowed flooding in the neighborhood, but it also constrained flows in the river and pushed high velocity flows toward the opposite bank, where there's a highway, a regional trail system, and a fiber optic trunk line.
So we formed a regional entity, the Salmon Recovery Council, bureaucratically known as RIA 8, and brought the 40 different jurisdictions in King County with 2.2 million people living here together to say, how are we going to answer this challenge, keep our costs down, and ultimately get to the point of recovering at least Chinook and other species as well if we could.
One of the solutions for a significant flood problem like this, where the river cannot be contained, is to offer a flood buyout. We buy the homes out at fair market value. We don't discount them for the flood damage they've experienced. Again, making the property owner whole so they can go find another safer place to live. It's all about getting people out of harm's way.
This image shows kind of what the project looked like when we started. And in particular of note, this facility right here, this is what was called the Rainbow Bend Levee. So that was the kind of the main rationale for doing this project, was to address this levee. In addition to the berm that you see here that provided some level of flood protection, but not complete flood protection back here, this whole section of the riverbank on the right bank was armored with rocks. So not only was there a levee that prevented some flood flows at least from reaching this area, in addition, this bank was armored so it prevented the river from moving at all. So the river was kind of locked in place there. Our focus was to remove constraints, to try and reactivate the floodplain, and then let the river do the work.
I was the senior ecologist on the design team for this project, and it's been really fascinating to watch how this site has played out and evolved since 2013 when we removed the levee. I think the simplest way to talk about that is to talk about the width. Started at about 100 feet, a really constrained channel, jumped to 200 feet pretty quickly, and where we're standing right now is about 300 feet wide. That increase in width allowed the velocity of the water during floods to go way down, and then that reduction in velocity allowed a lot of sediment to fall out. In some places we've got 12 feet of sediment. The bed is 12 feet higher than what it was before, and across on average, we're looking at like the floodplain elevation is about 2 feet above the channel bed throughout the whole thing. And what that means, you add water on top of that, and now you've got areas in this floodplain in back of me that are flowing year-round that never would have seen water during even a moderate to large flood before the project. So from a fish's perspective, the fish coming down this river, the little fish, they're 2 or 3 inches big when they come out of the gravel, they need to get out of the main stem. It's not a friendly place at all. They can now come into this floodplain, spread into the forest where you've got slow water, you've got large wood, really good rearing environment, and stay here for 4 to 6 months and go from 1 or 2 inches to 3 or 4 inches, get much bigger fish going out into the salt. Those larger fish out into the salt return at a much higher rate than those smaller fish that get flushed out to the lake and then to salt.
Immediately after construction, the year after, when the salmon were returning, the side channel that was built and created, the salmon that laid nests in that side channel represented 9% of the total redds or nests in the whole river system. So the fish really keyed in on that newly restored gravel that was there available in that side channel, that kind of disturbed area, which we know that they like. They like when the gravel shifts and it creates bars and there's new complexity going on. And they really keyed in on that, used that site right away for their building their nests. It was at such a density that it was pretty amazing to see.
Seattle Public Utilities had the opportunity to leverage so much more success with the Cedar River Downstream Habitat Program by working directly with King County and Seattle folks to realize our vision. A ton of the work is making sure that when you take the sideboards off, the river will not get so out of control that it compromises the human infrastructure you still need to keep. But when you're able to design a project that does so, you can see how letting the river become unbound and even somewhat destructive also allows the ecosystem to become more creative and constructive with complex habitat. It teaches us so much more about the process of freeing rivers again, and of the big picture for what we need to do to keep salmon of multiple species coming back for generations to come.
I'm really pleased with what I see. Every time I come out, it gets better and better. And I think about this as a benefit that won't just be short term in the 1, 2, 5, or even 10-year period, but rather something that will yield habitat for salmon, and there's one right there. Benefit to salmon for decades. It will enhance and restore habitat of a variety of types. The river will shift and cause new habitats to form and the like, but that is a a long-term thing, which I'm very proud to say that I was associated with. And hopefully 100 years from now, we'll have many fewer of the constraints that we put on the river when we thought that was the best way to manage rivers. And we'll see this kind of habitat everywhere, and the salmon will be abundant. And we'll talk about, do you remember when they were so, so close to being not in our river systems anymore.
Rainbow Bend also advances the priorities of the Lake Washington Cedar-Sammamish Watershed Chinook Salmon Conservation Plan. Most significantly, perhaps, it addresses the most critical limiting factor for Chinook on the Cedar, which is limited juvenile rearing and refuge habitat. The project's scale and the approach significantly improved conditions for Chinook and other species.
This river has gone through so much. We are in a position now to sort of give back to it and let it heal a little bit. We really value our natural spaces and our rivers, and we want them to still function even if they're running through our cities.
The recovery effort's going to go on for another many years, but we've come a long ways in 25 years. Plans that have been accepted at every level of government, local, regional, state, federal. And now, more importantly, those plans put into place to do what we said we'd do, which is recover these fish, and at the same time receive some additional benefits like flood control. So that salmon recovery continues to be really important to people who live here, people in the state of Washington, and so that challenge will be with us for a while, but I hope the effort continues.
I think we have what it takes to succeed. The resources, the expertise, the will to do the work to leave this place better than it would have been without us.
We know salmon aren't doing that great in Washington state. We've been at this game of salmon recovery for 20 years, and we're still seeing populations suffering and declining. I mean, it's hard not to feel disheartened by that, but I think there's a lot of hope. We know a lot more than we did when we started. We know now that we need to go big to really see changes in those fish populations in order to bring them back. Here at Southbury Creek, we went big. We're standing here in this place that had been used for the last century for agriculture, and it wasn't a great site for agriculture, but it is super important for fish. The family who used to farm here sold the property because they wanted to see it conserved for habitat. At face value, this project is about bringing back more habitat, but what it's really doing is making more complex habitat that fish need to really grow and survive. This project is about salmon, but it's also about so much more than salmon. It's about natural systems and wildlife, birds, bugs, clean water, clean air. And it's about people and how we connect to the landscape.
I can envision already the longhouses behind me, the kids playing in the prairie. This area would have had Puyallups just like you would imagine, just a village with men, women, children, elders. We found just real evidence of stone tools, arrowheads, that sort of thing. To hold the artifacts that were made by my ancestors, the Puyallup ancestors, was huge. The power that it had, knowing that we were honoring our ancestors by finding this stuff, we were honoring them by being able to tell their story. It's hard to put into words how important and significant it is for our people. A project like this allows us that brief glimpse into what we're always trying to protect. The scope is massive. 2,800 trips have been traveled across our bridge, over 4,800 logs, 40 plus feet long. 292 of those were sharpened by hand.
Yeah, I absolutely am proud. Every single one of the guys out here that had a hand in this project are proud.
I'll be even more proud of it when I stand over this with my grandkid and say I did this.
The amount of jobs that this project created, countless. But the bang for your buck in one of these projects is far beyond the amount of jobs it creates. This site, to me, I hope becomes a model of what can be done and can be something that we could show that this absolutely works. This absolutely works. It works. The day we opened fish screens, the day we pulled sheets, the fish were using the side channel. It wasn't, oh, I wonder when the first one's gonna come. It was immediate. The more people that know about it, the more people that understand it, we will gain that following.
We've definitely reached a major milestone, but the long game here has just started. We're really looking to expand projects like this so we can go even bigger in order to see change.
People who say this is a waste of time or waste of money just really don't understand. We need these to help heal. We need to help bring back the healthy environment that we need to sustain life. You should care about what we're doing. I don't care, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. You should care about what we're doing. It's a bigger picture than what's going on today. This is for the future.
I mean, this is the legacy that our generation will leave on the landscape. And seeing that change makes me really hopeful.
I am a fisherman. I am a water person. I am a survivor of the Great Flood, and it's our way of life.
You know, really to the untrained eye, when you walk up to a river, your first thought is, wow, this is beautiful. I see clear water. I hear water flowing. I see trees along the banks. What's wrong with this river? And really, we did a lot of logging in these river valleys and changed the composition of the forests that line the rivers. And some of the first things that we took were the large logs. That is one of the main reasons NRCS is working with our partners to try to recreate this habitat. We're adding fuel back into the river system that was removed several hundred years ago. And the great thing about this is we restore the basic ingredients and let the river do the restoration. The river will finish the recipe for us in time.
So this project is part of a long-term restoration strategy on the Upper South Fork Nooksack River to recover Chinook salmon for the Lummi people and put large wood back in the river and create the habitat that's needed for salmon. From there, it's sort of Lincoln logs of placing all the other logs on top to create the structure. Now, all of this is done to the specifications of the engineering design. The log jams are designed to withstand 100-year flood flows. They're designed to be very stable. And then those juvenile salmon need cool, clean water, pools to hide with cover as they're growing before they make their way down the river to the estuary and then eventually the ocean.
The salmon come up to the Lummi Reservation and the Nooksack River. It's important for our people, the Lummi Nation, for salmon because we are Salish people. And we need salmon to survive, and that's our history with salmon. And we got to try to protect and preserve what we have left and protect our shellangin, our way of life.
Anything we can do as an agency to help with that salmon population is going to really allow the farms that we need in this area for growing our crops and the salmon that we need for our ecosystem and for our own values to really coexist. And so wherever NRCS can help and further these goals, it's really going to help preside salmon populations along with the farmland that we're traditionally working with.
We need help. All Lummi Nation people appreciate the help that we can get from NRCS.
Salmon don't choose the Columbia as their home. It chooses them. The taste and smell of their natal stream is an indelible imprint, the precise coordinates, a beacon. Home is a call to turn their back on the ocean and their nose upriver. In this case, upriver is no ordinary place. The Upper Columbia is a region of startling contrast and rich complexity. Unparalleled habitat, vast working forests, robust hydropower, and preeminent global agriculture all live here, as does a culture of caring and collaboration. In this place, salmon run deep. Between salty sea and gravel bed, Pacific Ocean and Upper Columbia, lie 500 miles that traverse the heart of Washington. Every step of the way, salmon weave through communities and connect economies, bringing us together in their journey upstream. A prized species with outsized impact. Their reach extends far beyond the river and into our social fabric. Jobs, forests, water, culture, food, and home. Salmon are a critical indicator of what matters most. Ridgetop to river, peak to plateau, our home is in the headwaters of the Columbia. It's where salmon are born and where they die. Perpetuating this cycle of life is critical to the integrity and promise of our unique region. We give, and salmon give back. Life without salmon would not be life as we know it. These fish are ours to share and ours to save. We must keep salmon coming home.